If you think your family is dramatic, let me introduce you to King Evander Whitlock, a man whose morning began with 1 royal headache, 2 passive-aggressive sighs from his mother, and a detailed discussion about his future children, none of whom currently existed. Not because he couldn't find a wife. Oh no, because, according to him, I would rather fight 3 wolves, a tax audit, and an emotionally unstable goat before attending another royal matchmaking dinner. Unfortunately for Evander, the moon goddess was listening. If King Evander Whitlock had known that leaving the palace that morning would eventually lead to him being aggressively manhandled by a stranger and paid like suspicious freelance labor, he still would have left. Because at that exact moment, the greatest threat to his peace, his sanity, and his very expensive royal bloodline was his mother. And she had woken up early with plans, violent, grandmother-flavored plans. Before we continue to witness a fully grown monarch get emotionally drop-kicked before breakfast, do the wise thing and subscribe. Because if you don't, Queen Mother Whitlock will personally add your name to her very aggressive list titled, "People Delaying My Grandchildren." And trust me, you do not want that kind of royal pressure in your life, all right? Let the poor man suffer alone. King Evander Whitlock, ruler of the North, undefeated in battle, and currently losing the war of breakfast diplomacy, sat very still at the long royal table. Across from him, Queen Mother Whitlock smiled. Not warmly, not kindly, but with the serene confidence of a woman who had already planned her son's entire romantic future, down to the embroidery on the baby blankets. Evander did not look up from his coffee. This was a survival technique. "My son," she said sweetly. Evander took a slow sip. "Yes, mother." "You are 27 years old." "I am aware," he replied calmly. "I was present at the event." A nearby servant immediately developed a life-changing interest in the curtains. "Coward." The Queen Mother folded her hands. "And yet," she continued, voice smooth as polished steel, "the royal nursery remains tragically silent." Ah, so this was the battlefield today. He set down his cup with the calm of a man who had survived assassination attempts and one extremely aggressive royal tailor. "Mother," he said patiently, "but if the silence of the nursery is keeping you awake at night, I can arrange for several very loud goats." A maid made a choking noise. Evander did not look back. He valued her life. The Queen Mother did not blink. "I am serious, Evander." "So are the goats," he said, very passionate about screaming. Remarkable work ethic. Her eyes narrowed slightly. Direct hit. "The kingdom requires an heir." "The kingdom," Evander said smoothly, rising to his feet, "also requires a king who is not being emotionally ambushed before breakfast." She rose too. Oh, fantastic. They were standing now. This had escalated from conversation to maternal warfare. "You cannot avoid this forever," she said. "Your bloodline is doing just fine," Evander cut in. "It's resting, hydrated, minding its business." A footman made a suspicious wheezing sound and immediately pretended to die quietly behind a pillar. "Traitor." The Queen Mother stepped closer, voice dropping into that dangerously gentle register every royal child learns to fear. "Evander Hale Whitlock." Oh no. Full government name deployed. Casualties were imminent. "You will attend the autumn selection," she continued. "You will choose a suitable bride, and you will stop behaving like the concept of marriage personally insulted you." Evander exhaled slowly through his nose. Then he smiled. It was the smile of a man who was about to become extremely uncooperative. "With all due respect, Mother." He reached calmly for his cloak. "I would rather fight wolves." A pause. A long pause. Somewhere in the room, a servant dropped a spoon and chose not to pick it up, presumably because they valued continued employment. The Queen Mother's lips twitched. Not quite a smile, more like the warning tremor before a natural disaster. "I have already prepared a list of suitable young women," she said, producing a folded parchment like a magician revealing a weapon. Evander leaned slightly to the side, peered at it, then leaned back. "I see at least 3 future headaches, and one woman who once tried to stab me with a dessert fork." She was enthusiastic. She was armed. "You exaggerate." "She chased me across a ballroom, Mother." The Queen Mother pressed forward with the determination of a general who had burned the retreat boats. "You are running out of time." Evander fastened his cloak with calm precision. "I am 27, or not a rapidly expiring loaf of bread. Your royal bloodline is still deeply unbothered." She inhaled slowly, dangerously. Evander, recognizing the early warning signs of Phase 2, Grandmother Offensive, moved swiftly toward the door. Strategic retreat. Very dignified, extremely fast. "With whom are you meeting today?" his mother called after him. Evander did not even break stride. "With peace and quiet," and then he escaped, down the corridor, around the corner, out of the palace like a man fleeing a very well-dressed natural disaster. Minutes later, safely outside the palace gates and disguised beneath a traveler's cloak, King Evander Whitlock exhaled the deep, relieved breath of a man who believed, foolishly, that the worst part of his day was behind him. Ahead waited a simple meeting at a tavern with his best friend, Lord Stellan Callahan. Behind him, his mother was already drafting baby names, and somewhere in the city, pure, unfiltered chaos named Vesper Callahan was waking up and preparing, unknowingly, to absolutely ruin his life. King Evander Whitlock had faced assassins. He had negotiated trade with 3 hostile territories. He had once endured an entire 4-hour poetry recital without blinking. None of it, prepared him for the unique psychological warfare known as trying to act normal in a tavern. The rusted tankard was loud, crowded, and smelled like regret marinated in spilled ale. Evander stepped inside under his travel cloak and immediately knew 2 things. 1. This had been a mistake. 2. The floor was sticky. Why was it sticky? Why was it always sticky? He moved carefully toward an empty table, the posture straight out of pure muscle memory. Years of royal training had wired his spine into permanent dignity mode. Unfortunately, dignified in this environment translated to suspiciously expensive man trying not to look expensive. He sat, too gracefully. A nearby patron squinted at him over the rim of his mug. Evander adjusted his shoulders. Relaxed. No, too relaxed. Now he looked like a nobleman pretending to be relaxed. This was going poorly. Act normal, he told himself. Normal men slouched. Normal men did whatever that man in the corner was doing with his boots. Evander attempted a casual lean. The chair creaked in protest. He froze. Was that structural instability? His eyes narrowed slightly. Noted, he thought grimly. Chair integrity. Questionable. Potential lawsuit material. A barmaid passed by. Evander gave what he believed was a perfectly ordinary nod. The barmaid blinked slowly, then kept walking. Concerning. Minutes passed, then more minutes, then enough minutes that Evander's patients began filing formal complaints. Stellan Callahan was late. Very late. Evander checked the tavern door again. Nothing. He drummed his fingers once on the table. Immediately regretted it. There was a suspicious ring of something dried near his hand. He lifted his fingers slowly. Very slowly. He was going to need new skin. Health violation review. Mental notes of King Evander Whitlock. Floor, sticky and possibly sentient. Tables, questionably sanitized. Chairs, emotionally unstable. Air quality, aggressive. That man in the corner, definitely coughing directly into the atmosphere. Evander inhaled through his nose. Instant regret. Why did it smell like damp bread and bad decisions? Another 10 minutes crawled by. Evander's eye twitched, just once. But still, he was beginning to feel personally disrespected by the furniture. The table wobbled. The table wobbled. Evander placed both hands on it slowly, like a man trying not to commit a small but emotionally satisfying crime. "Sir?" He looked up. The barmaid stood there again, eyeing him carefully. "Yes," Evander said smoothly. "You've been staring at that table for a while." Evander paused, considered lying, decided against it. It knows what it did. The barmaid blinked, then, very wisely, chose not to ask further questions and walked away. Still no Stellan. Unbelievable. Evander leaned back again, attempting a more convincing version of tired traveler this time. The chair made a noise. Not a good noise. A threatening noise. He went very still. Slowly, carefully. He sat back upright. Chair integrity downgraded to hostile, he noted. This was getting ridiculous. Another patron bumped his table on the way past. The drink in front of Evander sloshed dangerously close to the rim. Evander stared at it. The drink stared back, menacingly. He had not even ordered it. When had that arrived? Was anything in this establishment supervised? At the 1-hour mark, Evander reached a royal conclusion. Stellan Callahan was either dead, detained, or about to receive a very personal lecture. Evander stood smoothly, cloak shifting around him. Enough. If his best friend intended to be catastrophically late, Evander would at least suffer in horizontal comfort. He approached the counter. The innkeeper looked up. "You need something? A traveler?" Evander summoned his most convincingly average voice. "A room, for the night." The innkeeper eyed him once, slow, assessing. Evander held the look calmly. Normal. Very normal. Extremely not a king currently judging the entire establishment. "That'll be 5 silver. Evander paid without comment, though internally he did note the coin exchange lacked proper accounting procedure. Moments later, key in hand, King Evander Whitlock headed toward the stairs. Behind him, the tavern roared on in blissful ignorance. Ahead of him waited a quiet room, a blessedly horizontal future, and approximately 12 minutes of peace. Unfortunately for Evander, peace, much like the tavern's hygiene standards, was about to be violently compromised. King Evander Whitlock had exactly one goal: enter the room, lie down, but forget the tavern ever existed. Simple, elegant, emotionally achievable. The upstairs hallway of the Rusted Tankard was, unfortunately, just as suspicious as the rest of the building. The floorboards creaked like they were personally offended by his footsteps. The lanterns flickered. Somewhere, something dripped. Evander did not investigate. He had already conducted today's required number of bad decisions. With the calm precision of a man clinging to the last threads of his patience, he reached his door and slid the key into the lock. Click. Good. One small victory. He pushed the door open, and that was when fate, chaos, and one extremely unwell Omega decided to ruin his evening. She came out of nowhere. 1 second, the hallway was empty. The next, impact. A body slammed into his chest with the full emotional commitment of a woman who had never once in her life considered the concept of personal space. Evander staggered back a step. His brain, normally a well-oiled machine of royal composure, immediately blue-screened. Because there was a woman clinging to him, very tightly. "Help me." Her voice was breathless, rough, dangerously desperate. Evander blinked down at her, once, twice. This was unexpected. Up close, he could see the problem immediately. Her pupils were blown wide. Her breathing was uneven. Her grip on his shirt suggested she might actually tear the fabric if given enough emotional motivation. And her scent, Evander's spine snapped straight internally. Oh, this was bad. "Miss," he began carefully, summoning his calmest diplomatic tone. I believe you may be. She grabbed his collar, hard. Help. Me. Evander's internal monologue. This is not in today's schedule. Outwardly, he remained composed. Mostly. Perhaps, he tried again, very reasonably, we should locate a healer. No time. And before King Evander Whitlock, ruler of the North, strategic mastermind, professional handler of national crises, could finish that sentence, the woman hauled him forward. Reader, she dragged him. Dragged. The king. Into the room. The door swung wider as she shoved backward into it, pulling him with surprising strength. Evander, who had wrestled grown warriors and once disarmed an assassin mid-lunge, found himself off balance, off schedule, and deeply, deeply confused. Miss, he tried again, voice strained but still attempting dignity. You are making several very bold decisions. She pushed him inside. Hard. Evander stumbled across the threshold. His boot caught slightly on the rug. For one horrifying second, the King of the North nearly face-planted into tavern flooring. He recovered. Barely. Nobility intact by a thread. Her hands were still gripping his shirt. Her breathing hitched again. Up close, her voice dropped to a rough whisper. Please. Evander froze. Because despite the chaos, despite the fact that his evening had just been aggressively hijacked, there was real distress there. His jaw tightened. Noble instincts, activated, self-preservation instincts, filing complaints in the background. All right, he said slowly, carefully. Easy, just... Big mistake, because the moment he said that, the Omega snapped. Not violently, not dramatically, just decisively. She shoved the door shut behind them with her foot. Evander's head turned slightly, just enough to register. Slam. The sound echoed through the small tavern room like a declaration of extremely poor life choices. King Evander Whitlock stood very still, very aware, very suddenly aware that his peaceful evening had just been kidnapped. Behind the door, the hallway fell silent. Inside the room, chaos had officially clocked in for the night. For a long, deeply suspicious moment after the door slammed, King Evander Whitlock stood perfectly still. Because experience had taught him that when chaos entered a room this aggressively, the correct response was usually assess the situation, maintain dignity, do not make sudden movements. Unfortunately, the Omega clinging to his shirt had clearly never attended the same training seminars. Up close, the situation became painfully obvious. Her breathing was uneven. Her grip was unreasonably strong for someone who looked like she had just personally fought 3 bad decisions and won. And her eyes, sharp, fever bright, locked directly onto him like she had just found the last available lifeboat on a sinking ship. Evander's internal alarm bells began filing formal complaints. Ah, yes. This was extremely not ideal. Miss, he tried again carefully, summoning every ounce of royal composure he owned, you appear to be under the influence of something highly inconvenient. Her response was to grab his collar tighter, bold, unhinged, deeply disrespectful to the crown. Less talking, she breathed. Evander blinked. Once. Slowly. His internal monologue, normally calm and organized, was now flipping through emergency manuals at high speed, and this was not in today's schedule. Out loud, he attempted diplomacy. I would strongly recommend, no recommending. She pushed him backward. Evander, who had stood firm against charging war beasts, took one very undignified step back, and then another. This was becoming concerning. Miss, he said again, voice tighter now, we should approach this situation with... She pointed at him. Actually pointed. You, she said hoarsely, with the authority of someone who had absolutely no business being this commanding right now. Stop talking and be helpful. Evander stared at her. There was a long pause. Somewhere in the kingdom, his ancestors collectively felt a disturbance in the bloodline. This was not in today's schedule. He inhaled slowly through his nose. Calm, composed, royal. "I am attempting," he said with strained patience. "Woe to be helpful in a medically responsible manner." She stepped closer. Evander's brain short-circuited for approximately half a second. Because despite the chaos, despite the fact that this woman had just ambushed him like a very determined hurricane, she was still very clearly focused on one thing. Him. Specifically him. Not the room, not the door, not the very obvious option of finding literally anyone else. No. Fate, apparently, had singled him out personally. Rude. Her voice dropped, rough and breathless. "Please." Evander's jaw tightened. Because there it was again. That thread of genuine distress under all the chaos. And Evander Whitlock, unfortunately for his future peace, had never been particularly good at ignoring people in actual trouble, even when they were aggressively ruining his evening. "All right," he said finally, a voice low, controlled, and about 60% more careful than he felt. "But you are going to need to—" She grabbed his shirt again. Hard. And dear listeners, that was the exact moment King Evander Whitlock realized something deeply humbling. He was not steering this situation. Not even a little. From that point forward, events moved quickly, decisively, and with a complete and total lack of respect for Evander's carefully planned evening. Vesper, though he did not yet know her name, was bossy even while visibly struggling. Bossy, while half delirious, issuing breathless, very confident instructions like someone who had never once in her life considered the possibility of being ignored. Evander, meanwhile, was operating on pure crisis management. Outwardly, controlled. Internally, this was not in today's schedule. And this was extremely not in today's schedule. There had been no briefing for this. At one point he opened his mouth to say something. She shushed him. Shushed. The king of the North. Evander went very still. Somewhere deep in his soul, his dignity sat down and began quietly rethinking its life choices. Time blurred. The room felt smaller, warmer. The carefully structured plans of King Evander Whitlock's evening continued to collapse, like poorly stacked paperwork. And through it all, through the intensity, the confusion, the escalating realization that fate had personally decided to clown him, one thought kept looping through his mind like a royal distress signal. This was not in today's schedule. Eventually, inevitably. The long, chaotic night finally caught up with them both. Exhaustion hit, hard, fast, merciless. And somewhere between one heartbeat and the next, King Evander Whitlock, ruler of the North and recent victim of extremely aggressive circumstances, blacked out. King Evander Whitlock woke slowly. Not peacefully, not gracefully, but with the heavy, suspicious awareness of a man whose life had definitely gone off the rails while he was unconscious. He lay still for a moment, eyes closed, conducting a cautious internal systems check. Head, functional. Limbs, present. Dignity, pending investigation. His eyes opened. The tavern room came into focus in stages. Ceiling first, then the slightly crooked lantern, then silence. Evander blinked once. Frowned slightly, because something was missing. Very missing. He pushed himself upright, looked around, and confirmed the first emotional injury of the morning. The room was empty. Completely, and utterly, offensively empty. The Omega, his aggressively chaotic midnight problem, was gone. No dramatic goodbye, no awkward morning conversation. Not even a polite note that said sorry for the mild life disruption. Just gone. Evander exhaled slowly through his nose. Well, that was... Actually, no. He was not even sure what that was. He swung his legs off the bed and stood, rolling his shoulders once, the memory of last night arriving in extremely unhelpful, very vivid flashes. His jaw tightened. Then, his gaze dropped to the small table near the bed, and he froze. Because sitting there, in neat, unapologetic formation, were 10 very shiny gold coins. There was a long silence. Evander stared at the coins. The coins stared back, accusingly, disrespectfully, like they knew exactly what emotional damage they were about to cause. Slowly, very slowly, King Evander Whitlock approached the table, each step heavy with dawning realization, each breath more offended than the last, because next to the coins was a folded note. He picked it up, carefully, like it might explode, unfolded it, and read, "To the very handsome stranger I attacked, 5 stars, excellent stamina, strong grip, would absolutely recommend to a friend. Please accept this small token of appreciation for your community service. The woman who is definitely not making eye contact with you ever again." Silence. Absolute silence. The kind of silence that usually happens right before history records a very personal villain origin story. Evander did not move, did not blink, did not breathe, for exactly 3 seconds. Then, King Evander Whitlock, ruler of the North, undefeated in battle, yet professionally respected by 3 neighboring territories, started laughing. Not a polite chuckle, not a dignified royal exhale. No. This man laughed like someone who had just been personally drop-kicked by fate and had decided very maturely to find it hilarious. Low at first, then sharper, then fully, helplessly amused. He dragged a hand down his face, shoulders shaking once as another laugh escaped him. "Incredible," he muttered. "Absolutely incredible." He picked up one of the gold coins between his fingers, turning it slowly in the light like a man conducting a forensic investigation into his own humiliation. 10 coins? 10? Not 9? Not 11. A very specific, extremely intentional 10. His mouth twitched. Because the audacity, the confidence, the financial transaction energy of it all was almost impressive. Evander folded the note again with careful precision, though the smile tugging at his mouth refused to fully disappear. Somewhere out there was a woman bold enough to ambush a stranger, drag him into a room, emotionally and physically derail his evening, and then pay him, like suspicious contract work. Unbelievable, truly. He was still staring at the coins when, knock, knock. Evander's head turned slowly toward the door. Right on time. Because of course, now Stellan Callahan decided to exist. Evander exhaled once, already knowing, deep in his very tired soul, that the peace of this morning was officially over. Evander did not rush to open the door. He stood there for one long, reflective second, still holding one of the gold coins like physical evidence in a very personal crime. Then another knock came, more insistent, and more Stellan-flavored. Evander sighed the sigh of a man whose morning peace had already been buried with full honors. Enter. The door swung open. Stellan Reed Callahan walked in like someone who had absolutely no idea he was about to witness the funniest moment of his year. Tall, relaxed, mildly disheveled in the way of a man who had clearly not slept. "Evander," Stellan started, already rubbing the back of his neck. "Before you say anything, I know I'm late." He stopped. Mid-sentence, because his eyes had landed on the table, specifically on the 10 gold coins. There was a pause, a very dangerous pause. Stellan's brows lifted slowly. "Oh," he said. Evander closed his eyes briefly. He could already feel it coming, like thunder before a storm. But Stellan looked from the coins to Evander, back to the coins, and then, very slowly, a grin spread across his face. "Wow," Stellan breathed. Evander pointed a single, extremely calm finger at him. "Choose your next words carefully." Stellan ignored that advice immediately. But before we get into whatever... Stellan waved vaguely at the table, already fighting a smile. I owe you an apology. Evander crossed his arms. Yes, you do. Stellan exhaled, some of the humor fading. Family emergency. My cousin went missing last night. Evander's irritation dimmed a fraction. Missing? Yeah. Stellan scrubbed a hand down his face. Whole family's been looking for her since yesterday evening. Absolute disaster. Evander's posture shifted slightly. Professional concern. Activated. And you're only arriving now because... Because, Stellan said tiredly, we finally confirmed she's alive, just being a problem somewhere, like usual. Evander's mouth twitched faintly. That sounded ominous. Unfortunately for his continued dignity, Stellan's attention drifted right back to the table, to the coins, to the very obvious setup for humiliation. So, Stellan said slowly, voice thick with barely contained violence, of the laughing variety. You want to explain why you look like you just completed a very successful side quest? Evander inhaled, exhaled, very calmly. I had, he said with dangerous smoothness, an eventful evening. Stellan leaned against the wall. Oh, I'm seated, he said. Please, ruin my morning. So Evander told him, calmly, clinically, but with the emotional restraint of a man who refused to admit he had been personally outmaneuvered by a stranger. He described arriving at the tavern, booking the room, the sudden hallway ambush, the aggressively determined Omega, and the complete and total lack of control over the situation. Stellan listened, very quietly, very still, processing, processing, processing. Then Stellan lost his entire mind. He doubled over, actually doubled over, a full, wheezing, oxygen-compromised collapse against the nearest chair. Wheeze, paid? Evander's eye twitched. Once. Control yourself. Stellan pointed at the coins like they had personally delivered joy into his bloodstream. She left you 10 gold pieces like you were premium evening entertainment. Evander's voice dropped several degrees. Stellan. But Stellan was gone. Gone. Spiritually ascended into the highest realm of friendship betrayal. Oh, this is rich, Stellan gasped, wiping at his eyes. This is elite. This is historic. Evander took one slow step forward. Dangerous. Measured. You are walking, he said softly. A very fine line between humor and treason. Stellan straightened, barely, still grinning like a man who had just been handed blackmail material by the universe itself. Your Majesty, he said, voice dripping with delight. Have you considered opening a side business? Evander's stare could have frozen lava. Finish that sentence carefully. Stellan clasped his hands behind his back, visibly fighting another laugh. I'm just saying, he continued sweetly. With reviews like that note suggests. But you could charge double. Evander picked up one of the gold coins. Not threateningly, but not threateningly either. There was a long pause. Then, very slowly, Evander said, If one more word about this leaves your mouth... His smile was sharp, royal, extremely dangerous. I will personally reassign you to oversee goat breeding in the northern mountains. Stellan froze, considered it, then snorted. Worth it. Evander turned away before he committed a light but emotionally satisfying act of violence. Unbelievable, absolutely unbelievable. Still grinning, Stellan pushed off the wall. All right, he said, trying and failing to regain composure. Jokes aside, his expression shifted slightly, more focused now. We're still trying to track my cousin's movements from last night. Evander didn't turn yet, but his attention sharpened. Problematic, Stellan continued, rubbing his jaw. Because when she disappears, it usually means... He stopped, frowned slightly, like a memory was lining up in his head. Evander finally glanced back, slowly, carefully, because something in Stellan's tone had just changed. "Your cousin," Evander said evenly. Stellan nodded, still frowning. "Yeah, you'll know her if you ever meet her." Evander's instincts stirred, quiet, suspicious. "Will I?" he asked. Stellan exhaled slowly. "Oh yeah," he said darkly. "My cousin has a reputation." Stellan did not yet realize he was standing on the edge of historical comedy. He was still casually leaning against the wall, arms folded, wearing the relaxed confidence of a man who believed the universe had already peaked with the 10-coin incident. He was wrong. Very wrong. "My cousin," Stellan began, rubbing his jaw like a man emotionally exhausted by one specific family member, "is difficult." Evander stood near the table. Still, composed, dangerously quiet. The coins sat between them like silent witnesses. Stellan continued. "She's chaotic." Evander's fingers stilled. Just slightly. Not enough for a normal person to notice. Unfortunately for him, Stellan was not a normal person. But he kept talking. "She gambles like she's trying to speed-run financial ruin?" Evander's gaze dropped slowly to the coins. 10. Very specific coins. "And she drinks," Stellan went on, warming up now, like someone personally offended by sobriety. Evander's spine straightened 1 precise inch. Flashback. A woman. Breathless. Fever-bright eyes. Very questionable life choices. "She's also," Stellan added, with the long-suffering tone of a man who had personally witnessed too much, "been banned from 3 separate family gatherings." Evander froze. Not visibly. Not dramatically. But internally? Oh, internally the alarms were going off like a full palace evacuation. Flashback. Her voice. Less talking. Her grip on his shirt. Her complete and total lack of hesitation. Evander's brain, which had survived wars, negotiations, and one truly horrific royal dinner seating arrangement, began doing math. Aggressive math. Stellan, still blissfully unaware he was seconds away from detonating his best friend's peace of mind, kept going. "She once got temporarily escorted out of a wedding reception." Evander's jaw tightened. Just a fraction. "Why?" he asked, very evenly. Stellan snorted. "Oh, you know, on minor incident." Evander's stare sharpened. "Define minor." Stellan waved a hand. "Apparently there was a misunderstanding involving a card game, 2 offended nobles, and a decorative centerpiece that did not survive the evening." Flashback. The Omega in the hallway. Unapologetic. Bold. Moving like consequences were just polite suggestions. Evander's stomach dropped exactly 1 inch. Stellan pushed off the wall, now fully committed to storytelling mode. "And don't even get me started on the banishment." Evander's voice came out quieter, colder. "Banishment." "Oh yeah," Stellan said, grimly amused. "Family finally had enough last night. Officially kicked her out for 7 days, so the household could experience something radical." He paused. Deadpan. "Peace." The room went very still. Because in Evander's head, the math was mathing, out violently. Flashback. The note. To the very handsome stranger I attacked. Flashback. 10 coins, neatly arranged, with confidence, with experience. Evander slowly turned toward the table again, picked up one of the coins, turned it once between his fingers. Very calm, very controlled, very much the posture of a man whose life was actively rearranging itself in real time. Stellan finally noticed the silence had gotten weird. He squinted slightly. "Why are you standing like that?" Evander did not answer immediately, because another memory had just surfaced. Sharp. Clear, extremely inconvenient. Flashback. Her voice, rough and breathless. Please. Evander's grip on the coin tightened. Not enough to bend it, but enough to emotionally threaten it. Behind him, Stellan kept talking, still unknowingly digging his own grave. Anyway, if you ever meet her, you'll recognize her immediately. Evander's voice, when it came, was very precise, very careful. Will I? Oh, absolutely, Stellan said with complete confidence. She's unforgettable. Evander slowly turned his head. His expression was calm. Too calm. The kind of calm that usually precedes either a diplomatic incident or a very personal crisis. There was a long pause. Then, very slowly, King Evander Whitlock said, "Describe her again." Vesper Quinn Callahan woke up with exactly two thoughts. First, her head hurt. Second, something extremely questionable had happened last night. She opened one eye slowly. The ceiling above her was unfamiliar. That was never a good sign. Vesper lay very still for 3 full seconds, conducting her standard morning-after-damage assessment, at which she had unfortunately perfected over the years. Head, pounding but operational. Limbs, present. Clothes, still on. Promising, suspiciously promising. She pushed herself upright, paused, and then, memory hit, hard, fast, ruthless. Flash, a hallway. Flash, a very tall man. Flash, her aggressively poor decision-making. Vesper froze. Her eyes widened slightly. Oh. There was a brief moment. A tiny, fragile window of potential shame. A flicker. A whisper. A gentle emotional knock that said, "Hey, maybe we should reflect on our life choices." Vesper stared into the middle distance. Considered it. Really gave it a solid 2 seconds of evaluation. Then, she flopped back onto the bed. Nope. Listen. In Vesper's professional opinion, shame was simply not a productive use of anyone's morning energy. Had things gotten chaotic last night? Ah, yes. Had she perhaps made several bold, extremely unfiltered decisions? Also yes. But, important counterpoint, she was alive, relatively hydrated, and, if memory served, she had left payment, which, frankly, made her one of the more considerate citizens in this situation. Vesper sat back up, rubbing her temples. Okay, she muttered to herself. We're not thinking about that. New plan. Step 1. Emotional suppression. Step 2. Breakfast, in that exact order. By the time she finished splashing water on her face and dragging herself into the Callahan family dining room, her expression was fully reset into its usual setting. Unbothered menace. Unfortunately for her peace, the entire table was already occupied, and every single person present looked tired. Deeply tired. Existentially tired. On the kind of tired that suggested Vesper had personally contributed to their suffering. Rude. Her aunt didn't even look up from her tea. You're alive. Vesper dropped into her seat. Good morning to you too. Across the table, one of her cousins rubbed his face slowly. We searched half the city. Vesper reached calmly for the bread. Well, she said reasonably, now you know I wasn't in the half you searched. 3 family members closed their eyes at the same time. Her uncle pointed a very tired finger at her. You were banished for 7 days. Yes. You have been gone for less than 1 night. Yes. You immediately caused a citywide headache. Vesper buttered her bread with surgical calm. Allegedly. There was a long, suffering silence around the table, where the Callahan family looked like people who had collectively aged 10 years overnight. Vesper, meanwhile, was already halfway through her first bite of breakfast, fully committed to her life philosophy of, if you don't acknowledge the chaos can't emotionally invoice you. Her aunt finally sighed. Long. Deep. Spiritually exhausted. One day, the woman said, staring into her tea like it contained answers, peace will find this family. Vesper chewed thoughtfully. Not if I find it first. 3 people at the table physically slumped. She was reaching for her second piece of bread when her uncle spoke again. Casual. Too casual. The king is in town, by the way. Vesper paused. Just slightly. Barely noticeable. To the untrained eye. Then she took another bite. Chewed. Swallowed. And said, with complete, their professional calm. Good for him. Evander had faced assassins. Evander had faced war councils. Evander had once endured a 5-hour banquet seated next to a duke who chewed like a malfunctioning horse. Nothing had prepared him for returning to the scene of last night's emotional crime. The tavern stood exactly where it had the night before. Innocent. Unbothered. Probably still smelling faintly of bad decisions and spilled ale. Evander stopped at the entrance, staring at the wooden sign like it personally owed him money. Behind him, Stellan leaned casually against a pillar, watching his king with the focused delight of a man who had front-row tickets to a disaster. "Your Majesty," Stellan said sweetly, "are we going in, or are we going to glare at the building until it confesses?" Evander did not move. Evander did not blink. Evander was conducting advanced internal screaming. "This," Evander said slowly, "was not in today's schedule." Stellan grinned. "Oh, I strongly disagree. This is the best thing on your schedule." Evander finally pushed the door open. And fate, that messy, chaotic gremlin, immediately started clapping. The moment they stepped inside, the tavern keeper froze. Not subtly, not gracefully. No. The man went rigid like someone had just yelled tax audit. Evander clocked it instantly. Stellan clocked it too. They exchanged a look. Target acquired. Evander approached the counter with his most regal, composed, definitely not haunted expression. "Good morning," he said smoothly. The tavern keeper squeaked. Actually squeaked, like a distressed door hinge. "Yes, person." Stellan leaned on the counter, grinning, predatory, unthriving. "We're looking for someone," Stellan said pleasantly. "Female, chaotic, likely to cause property damage without prior notice." The tavern keeper visibly aged 3 years. Evander's eyes narrowed slightly. Interesting. Very interesting. "Yes," Evander added calmly. "She may have visited recently." The man swallowed. Hard. "Oh," he said weakly. "That one." Evander stilled. Stellan lit up like festival fireworks. "Oh?" Stellan leaned closer. "You remember her?" The tavern keeper stared into the middle distance like a man reliving wartime memories. "Sir," he said hoarsely, "we are still repairing the chair." Evander closed his eyes. Briefly. This was not in today's schedule. Things escalated quickly after that. Too quickly. First, Evander attempted to examine the upstairs hallway. A serving girl turned the corner at the exact wrong moment. They collided. Gracefully? No. Regally? Absolutely not. The king of an entire realm nearly ate the floor like a common pedestrian. Stellan caught him by the shoulder at the last second. Barely. "Careful, Your Majesty," Stellan said, voice dripping with fake concern. "Wouldn't want you defeated by furniture and floorboards." Evander straightened slowly. Dignity in shambles. Soul slightly dented. "This," he muttered under his breath, "was not in today's schedule." Second, a barmaid, attempting to eavesdrop, leaned too far over the railing upstairs. The railing, clearly tired of everyone's nonsense, cracked loudly. She yelped. Stellan grabbed her arm. Evander grabbed the railing. The railing gave up on life entirely. There was a very dramatic, a very unnecessary moment where everyone froze like a badly directed stage play. Then, crack. Chaos. Wood everywhere. Dignity nowhere. Somewhere in the universe, fate was wheezing. Across town, completely unaware of the royal investigation spiraling into slapstick history. Vesper was eating. Peacefully. Contentedly. Like she had not body-slammed a monarch less than 12 hours ago. She sat at the long Callahan family breakfast table, chewing with the calm confidence of a woman who simply refused to participate in consequences. Around her, her family looked tired. Not regular tired. Generationally exhausted. Her aunt pinched the bridge of her nose. Her cousin stared into the distance. Her uncle was halfway through what looked like a stress-induced life re-evaluation. Vesper, meanwhile, reached for more bread. "Morning," she said brightly. No one responded. A long pause. Finally, her aunt spoke. "Vesper." "Yes?" "Why?" her aunt asked slowly. "Did we receive a complaint from the Eastern Tavern District?" Vesper did not even flinch. Icon behavior. "I support local businesses," she said calmly. Across the table, someone whispered, "We are never recovering from this child." Vesper buttered her bread, unbothered, unashamed, professionally problematic. Evander stood in the middle of the tavern, staring at the damaged railing like it had personally betrayed him. Stellan, meanwhile, was smiling. Too calmly, too knowingly, dangerously knowingly. "You're tense," Stellan said lightly. Evander's eye twitched. "I am composed." "You look like a man being hunted by his own memories?" "This," Evander said through his teeth, "was not in today's schedule." Stellan folded his arms. Thinking, processing, watching his king unravel in high definition. "You know," Stellan said slowly, "for someone you claim was a random tavern menace, the staff seem very familiar with her." Evander froze, just slightly, but Stellan saw it. Oh, he saw it, and the suspicion in his eyes sharpened. "Your Majesty," Stellan said mildly, "what exactly did this woman do to you?" Evander turned his head. Very slowly. The look he gave Stellan could have started small international incidents. But before he could answer, the tavern doors burst open, hard enough to make half the room jump. A royal messenger stood in the doorway, slightly out of breath and clearly reconsidering his career choices. "Your Majesty." Evander straightened automatically. King mode. Activated. "What is it?" The messenger bowed quickly. "Or there has been an official summons." Stellan's brows lifted. Evander's stomach did something deeply suspicious. "From whom?" Evander asked carefully. The messenger swallowed. "The Callahan family, Your Majesty." Silence. Long, heavy, suspicious silence. Somewhere in Evander's memory, coin purse, wild eyes, unhinged energy, the math was beginning to math. Stellan slowly turned his head toward Evander, smiling like a man who smelled incoming chaos. And fate, oh, fate was absolutely cackling. If Evander had been given the option to wrestle a bear instead of attending this meeting, he would have already been halfway up the bear. The Callahan estate loomed ahead, large, respectable, and carrying the very specific energy of a household that had seen too much nonsense and survived purely out of spite. Evander stepped out of the carriage with the dignity of a king. Internally, however, regret. Immediate, expanding, aggressively multiplying regret. Behind him, Stellan hopped down like a man arriving at free entertainment. "Oh, this is going to be good," Stellan murmured. Evander did not look at him, because if he did, treason might happen. "This," Evander said under his breath, "was not in today's schedule." Stellan beamed. The moment they entered the Callahan residence, sound hit them. Not conversation, not discussion. Sound. Voices overlapped like a badly conducted orchestra. "I told you she climbed out the window. She did not climb, she launched. Who gave her access to the East Wing? Why are we still surprised? Because last time she only stole a horse." Evander stopped walking. Stellan leaned slightly closer, but whispered, delighted, I love them already. Evander inhaled slowly through his nose. The doors to the main sitting hall swung open. And there they were, the Callahan family. They looked respectable, well-dressed, well-bred, perfectly noble, and every single one of them carried the hollow-eyed expression of people who had been emotionally drop-kicked by the same woman for years. The moment Evander stepped in, the room went quiet. Blessedly. Suspiciously. Dozens of eyes turned toward him. Then, they all started talking again. At the same time. Your Majesty, welcome. Ignore the East Wing situation. We deeply apologize for any... Has she committed treason this week? Someone check the roof. Evander stood very still, very regal, very much reconsidering every decision that had led him here. Beside him, Stellan was thriving. Fully thriving, emotionally moisturized. This was his Olympics. Finally, somehow, an older woman stepped forward, elegant, composed, carrying the spiritual fatigue of someone who had personally witnessed Vesper's entire life. Your Majesty, she said with a graceful bow, I am Lady Callahan. Please forgive the atmosphere. Behind her, something crashed loudly. No one reacted, not one person. Evander blinked slowly. I see, he said carefully. Lady Callahan sighed the sigh of a woman who had long since accepted chaos as a permanent roommate. If you are here regarding Vesper, she continued, please know we are handling it. Stellan made a small, choking noise. Evander did not move, did not blink, did not breathe normally. Handling it, he repeated. Lady Callahan nodded wearily. Yes, we've taken appropriate disciplinary action. Evander's stomach dropped. Stellan leaned forward like a man hearing premium gossip. And what, Stellan asked sweetly, does disciplinary action look like in this household? Lady Callahan answered without hesitation. Oh, we banished her. Pause. Evander blinked. Once, Stellan's grin widened slowly. You did what? Evander asked. Lady Callahan waved a tired hand. Temporary banishment. 7 days. Silence. Heavy. Stunned. Processing silence. Behind Evander, Stellan lost the battle. A strangled laugh escaped him. Then another. Then, he turned away, shoulders shaking violently. Evander closed his eyes. Because the math was now screaming. This, Evander whispered internally, soul leaving his body in stages. This was absolutely not in today's schedule. And because fate is cruel and loves escalation, the Callahan family kept going. Oh yes, one uncle added cheerfully. 7 days should calm her down. Last time we tried 5, someone else muttered. She came back with a pet hawk and a gambling debt, another voice added. We don't talk about the hawk incident, Lady Callahan said firmly. Stellan was fully bent over now, physically compromised by laughter. Evander stood in the center of the room like a man watching his peaceful life flash before his eyes. Slowly, painfully, inevitably. And then, because the universe has impeccable comedic timing, boom! The front doors of the Callahan estate burst open, hard, violently, with the unmistakable energy of incoming problems. Every head in the room turned. Evander's spine went rigid. Stellan straightened slowly, eyes lighting up like a man who smelled fresh chaos baking. From the entryway came hurried footsteps. Fast, familiar, dangerous, and somewhere deep in Evander's soul. Instinct screamed, oh no, oh no! The Callahan estate doors did not simply open. They announced violence, bootsteps, fast, confident, unapologetic. Every head in the room turned toward the entrance. And then, Vesper Quinn Callahan walked in like a woman who had absolutely no idea she was about to ruin multiple lives simultaneously. Her hair was slightly wind-tousled. Her expression was calm. Her energy said, I have returned, and I brought problems with me. She took exactly 3 steps into the room. Then she looked up and saw him. Evander Whitlock froze. Not politely, not subtly. No. And this man froze like his soul had just unplugged itself and filed for early retirement. Across the room, Vesper froze too, mid-step, mid-breath, mid-life. Silence dropped, heavy, violent, thick enough to spread on toast. Stellan's eyes moved slowly, from Evander to Vesper, back to Evander, back to Vesper, again and again and again. His grin began. Slow, sinister, absolutely demonic. Oh, Stellan breathed softly. The grin widened. This is about to be the best day of my life. Vesper recovered first. Of course she did. Professional problem that she was. Her spine straightened, her chin lifted, her face rearranged itself into the expression of someone who absolutely did not recognize the tall, dangerously handsome man across the room. No idea who that is, she said immediately. Evander blinked. Once. Slowly. Dangerously. You... He stopped, because the words in his throat were currently on fire. Vesper crossed her arms. Cool, unbothered, deeply committed to lying through her teeth. We have never met, she added firmly. Stellan made a choking noise that sounded suspiciously like joy. Evander's eye twitched. Just once. But it was the twitch of a man standing at the edge of several very poor decisions. We have, he said carefully. Vesper's smile sharpened. Polite? Deadly. Oh? When exactly would that have been, Your Majesty? Evander inhaled slowly. Too slowly, like a man trying not to commit a felony in formal wear. Around the time, he said, voice dangerously calm, someone threw 10 gold coins at me and fled the scene like a financially responsible criminal. The room went silent. Dead silent. Vesper did not move, did not blink, and did not breathe normally. Stellan. Oh, Stellan was ascending. This man was witnessing history. Vesper tilted her head slightly, feigning confusion so hard it should have been illegal. I pay my debts, she said smoothly. Evander let out a short, humorless laugh. Oh, I noticed. Stellan raised one shaking finger. Wait, he said weakly, already struggling to breathe. Wait. He turned slowly toward Evander, eyes gleaming with wicked delight. Tell me, Stellan whispered. This is the woman who left you the note. Evander closed his eyes briefly, because peace was no longer an option. When he opened them again, they landed squarely on Vesper. Yes. Stellan folded in half. Physically, spiritually, emotionally, this man was gone. Vesper's composure cracked, just slightly, a tiny fracture, barely visible, but Evander saw it. Oh, but he saw it. And, Evander continued mercilessly, would you like me to read the note aloud, Lady Callahan? The room leaned forward collectively. Hungry, invested, emotionally seated. Vesper pointed at him, immediate, threatening. You will not. Evander smiled. Slow, royal, dangerous. Oh, he said softly. I absolutely will. Stellan was now clinging to a nearby chair for survival. Lady Callahan looked like she might pass out. One uncle had already started rubbing his temples. Vesper stepped forward. One step. Then another. Eyes locked on Evander. Electric. Sharp. Loaded with the promise of future violence. You, she said sweetly, are enjoying this far too much. Evander leaned slightly closer. Voice low. Controlled. But you started it. And then... silence again. But this time, different. Heavier. Charged. But the air between them tightened. Not just embarrassment, not just chaos. Something else slid quietly into the space between them. Something warm. Dangerous. Uninvited. Stellan slowly straightened. Looked between them. Once. Twice. then grinned like a man who had just discovered premium entertainment for the foreseeable future. "Yeah," he murmured. "Oh, this is going to be messy." Evander and Vesper did not look away from each other. Not once. Not even a little. Silence lingered in the Callahan sitting room. Not peaceful silence. Oh no. This was the thick, suffocating silence of collective realization slowly crawling out of the shadows. Lady Callahan blinked once, twice, then very slowly turned her head toward Vesper. "Vesper," she said carefully, the way one addresses a known public menace. "What exactly did you do?" Vesper, a professional survivor that she was, didn't even flinch. She lifted one shoulder in a casual shrug. Define did. Across the room, 3 relatives made identical exhausted sounds. Stellan, meanwhile, fully, emotionally, spiritually committed to the chaos. This man had taken a front-row seat and ordered popcorn. He clapped his hands together once, bright, cheerful, dangerous. "Well," he announced, "since we're all friends here." Evander turned slowly. Stellan. It was not a threat. It was worse. It was a promise. Stellan grinned wider, unbothered, unstoppable. "Oh, relax," he said breezily. "I'm just saying the tension in this room could season food." Unfortunately for Evander's remaining peace of mind, Lady Callahan stood, decisive, regal, clearly a woman who had raised a menace and survived. "Well," she declared, "since His Majesty is already here, and since Vesper has clearly—" She paused, visibly searching for a polite word and failing. "Interacted." Evander's eye twitched. "I believe it would be wise for the 2 of you to speak privately." Both Evander and Vesper spoke at the exact same time. "No. Absolutely not." They stopped, turned, glared at each other. The room leaned in, hungry, invested, emotionally hydrated. Lady Callahan clapped her hands once, sharp, final. "Oh, it's not a request." 5 minutes later, Evander and Vesper stood in a smaller sitting chamber, alone. The door closed behind them with the soft, ominous click of fate locking them in. They stood 3 feet apart, which was already too close. Evander crossed his arms, regal irritation personified. "You," he said flatly, "are a menace." Vesper smiled. Slow, unrepentant. And yet," she said sweetly, "you survived." His jaw tightened. Because unfortunately, technically, she was not wrong. Unacceptable. Deeply unacceptable. "This was not," Evander muttered, rubbing his temple, "in today's schedule." Vesper perked up slightly. "Oh, good," she said. "We're back to the schedule thing. I was worried you'd grown." He stared at her. Long. Hard. Deeply reconsidering several life choices and possibly the structural integrity of this building. The air between them shifted. Not softer. Not gentler. Just charged. Like the moment before lightning decides to ruin someone's afternoon. Vesper tilted her head, studying him now with open curiosity. "You're very dramatic for someone who got paid in advance," she said. Evander let out a short, disbelieving laugh. "You threw money at me like I was tavern entertainment." "You're welcome," she replied promptly. His eye twitched again. Stellan, somewhere outside the door, could probably feel the tension through the walls and was absolutely thriving. Right on cue. The door cracked open slightly, because of course it did. Stellan's head appeared in the gap like a man who feared neither God nor consequences. "Just checking," he said brightly. "Has anyone started yelling yet? Or should I come back with snacks?" "Out!" Evander snapped. The door shut, but not before Stellan's deeply satisfied cackle echoed down the hallway. Silence fell again. But this time, it wasn't just awkward. It wasn't just chaotic. It was dangerous. Evander exhaled slowly. Long. Controlled. like a man coming to terms with a deeply inconvenient truth. His gaze lifted to Vesper, but who was still watching him, still smiling, still entirely too pleased with herself. And in that moment, Evander Whitlock realized two things with horrifying clarity. Vesper Callahan was absolutely insufferable, and he was already in very serious trouble. Vesper's smile widened. Slow. Knowing. Like a woman who might, at any moment, ruin his life again. The Callahan sitting room looked like it had hosted many things over the years: diplomatic discussions, family celebrations, and at least 3 emotional breakdowns. Today? It was hosting judgment. The entire Callahan clan sat assembled with the grim, unified energy of people who had survived Vesper for decades and were braced for fresh trauma. At the center of the room stood Evander Whitlock, king of the realm, conqueror of territories, currently sweating in places no monarch should ever sweat. Beside him, Vesper leaned against the arm of a chair, looking mildly interested, like she had wandered into a play and decided to stay for the snacks. Across the room, Stellan had indeed acquired snacks. Multiple snacks. He was emotionally prepared for the mess. Evander cleared his throat. Once. Twice. He straightened to full royal height. This was it. Time to tell the truth. What I am about to say, Evander began carefully, requires context. The Callahan family leaned forward. As one, like a pack of emotionally exhausted wolves. Vesper squinted at him. Oh, this should be good. Evander shot her a look, sharp, long-suffering, deeply personal. Then he inhaled slowly and began. I arrived at the tavern in disguise, Evander said, nods around the room. Reasonable, understandable. So far, so good, one uncle muttered. Evander continued. My friend, he flicked a brief, murderous glance at Stellan, was late. Stellan waved cheerfully with a biscuit in hand. No regrets? Evander ignored him through great personal sacrifice. I waited. I attempted to blend in. Vesper snorted. Loud. Evander paused mid-sentence, turned slowly. Would you like to tell this story, Lady Callahan? She immediately straightened. Please continue, Your Majesty. Stellan made a small, choking noise. Evander pressed on. When my friend failed to arrive, I booked a room upstairs to rest. Lady Callahan nodded thoughtfully. All reasonable decisions. Evander's eye twitched. That is where the situation ceased to be reasonable. The entire family went still. Vesper suddenly found the ceiling fascinating, but Stellan leaned forward like a man approaching the peak of a roller coaster. Evander clasped his hands behind his back. Very formal, very controlled, very much a man reliving trauma. I reached the corridor outside my room, he said slowly, and was immediately intercepted. Pause. Heavy pause. Intercepted? Lady Callahan repeated carefully. Evander looked straight ahead, like a soldier reporting from the battlefield. Yes. Another pause. Longer. Deeper. Then, because apparently his dignity had already left the building. She launched at me. The room exploded, not loudly, but violently. 5 Callahans inhaled at once. Someone dropped a teacup. Stellan folded forward over his knees in silent hysteria. Vesper covered her face, but not fast enough. Evander continued, voice very tight. She was clearly under the influence of an aphrodisiac. That did it. Lady Callahan closed her eyes. Long, slow, spiritually tired. Of course she was. Evander was committed now. There was no surviving this, only finishing it. She grabbed me, he said. Vesper muttered into her hands. In my defense, do not defend, Lady Callahan said without opening her eyes. Evander pressed on. She requested assistance. Polite, measured, diplomatic. Then she dragged me into the room. The silence that followed was holy, sacred, nuclear. Stellan slapped both hands over his mouth, shoulders shaking violently. One uncle whispered faintly, "She what?" Evander's jaw tightened. "Yes." Vesper peeked through her fingers. "You're making it sound very aggressive." Evander turned his head slowly. It was aggressive. She considered that. Fair. Evander exhaled slowly, like a man nearing the end of a very long, very embarrassing report. "When I woke the next morning," he said, voice flat, "she was gone." All eyes slid slowly toward Vesper, who suddenly looked extremely interested in the carpet. "And in her place," Evander continued, each word heavier than the last, "I found 10 gold coins." Stellan lost the fight. A strangled wheeze escaped him. Lady Callahan pinched the bridge of her nose. "Of course you did." Evander was not done. Oh no. Pain demanded completion. "And," he said, staring directly at Vesper now, "a note." Vesper pointed at him immediately. "You promised not to read it aloud." "I promised nothing." "You implied." "I did not." Stellan was no longer functioning as a human being. Evander straightened slowly. Regal again. Composed again. A king reclaiming ground after emotional warfare. "In light of these events," he said firmly, "I am prepared to take responsibility for Lady Vesper." Silence fell. Thick. Processing. Then, the Callahan family activated their single shared brain cell. "Marriage." It erupted from 3 directions at once. Immediate, unanimous, violent. Vesper choked. "Excuse me." Too late. Far too late. Because the Queen chose that exact moment to sweep into the room like destiny in expensive fabric. She took one look around. Clocked the tension. Clocked Vesper. Clocked her son. And her face lit up like a woman who had just been handed grandchildren on a silver platter. "Oh, good," she said briskly, already pulling out her notebook. "Let's discuss baby names." Evander closed his eyes. Long, slow, accepting. Because somewhere deep in his bones, he knew. But he had not just walked into this situation. He had sprinted, head first, with enthusiasm. Vesper looked at him. Slow smile forming. Dangerous, amused. "Oh, Your Majesty," she said sweetly. "Ready to take responsibility?" Evander exhaled the sigh of a man whose peaceful life had officially been discontinued. "I walked into this one." From the corner, Stellan wheezed. "You dived." 8 months later, the royal palace had developed a new operating principle. If Lady Vesper Whitlock was awake, no one else would know peace. Servants moved faster. Guards prayed more. And the king? The king looked like a man who had personally wrestled fate and lost on technicalities. Vesper, very pregnant, very powerful, and very committed to being a public disturbance, was currently waddling down the east corridor with the slow or determined energy of a woman on a mission. Her hand rested on her very round belly. Her expression was thoughtful, which was never a good sign. Behind her, 2 maids trailed at a cautious distance like wildlife observers documenting a rare but dangerous species. Vesper stopped abruptly, turned, pointed at one of them. "You." The poor maid froze. "Yes, Your Grace?" Vesper narrowed her eyes. "Has anyone told the kitchen I'm thinking about food?" The maid blinked. "Thinking about..." "Because they should be emotionally preparing." Moments later, the doors to Evander's study burst open without ceremony, because Vesper did not believe in knocking. Evander, who had been peacefully reviewing trade documents like a man who remembered what calm felt like, did not look up immediately, because experience had taught him, or if the door slammed, brace yourself. "Yes, my love," he said carefully. Vesper planted herself in the center of the room, hands on hips, belly very present, authority undeniable. "I want pickles." Evander nodded slowly. "We have pickles." "With honey." He looked up. Very slowly. We do not do that. Vesper's eyes narrowed with the quiet intensity of a woman prepared to escalate. You're saying, she said softly, that the royal kitchen cannot handle pickles and honey. Evander set down his papers, folded his hands, stared directly into the face of his fate. I am saying, he replied carefully, that it is a crime against food. Vesper gasped, like he had personally insulted her ancestors. I am carrying your heir. Evander closed his eyes briefly, because that was always the finishing move. Or the king of the realm was now personally supervising the preparation of honey-covered pickles, because he enjoyed living. Vesper sat comfortably on the chaise in his study, already chewing like a woman who had never known shame and did not intend to start. She hummed thoughtfully between bites. Evander watched her the way generals watch natural disasters. You know, Vesper said casually, you're handling this pregnancy very well. Evander stared at her, flat, bone-tired. I am in survival mode. From across the room, the Queen looked up from the increasingly thick notebook in her lap. Because yes, the list was still growing. Oh, hush, she told Evander breezily. You were always meant to be a father. Evander turned slowly. Mother. Ignored. Completely. Professionally. The Queen simply pivoted toward Vesper with bright, dangerous interest. Now, she said eagerly, about the names. I've refined the list. Vesper immediately perked up. Oh good, I added more. Evander made a small sound that suggested his soul had briefly disconnected. The two women leaned over the notebook together like co-conspirators planning emotional warfare. Something strong, Vesper mused. Something dignified, the Queen agreed. Something that will make future suitors nervous. Obviously, they nodded in perfect sync. Evander dragged a hand slowly down his face. This, he muttered darkly, was not in today's schedule. Vesper didn't even look up. We're making a new schedule. Outside the study doors, palace staff moved quietly, carefully, with the haunted awareness of people who had witnessed the pickle incident, or the midnight pastry emergency, and whatever had happened last week involving 3 watermelons and a ceremonial sword. One guard leaned toward another and whispered, Do you think it gets worse after the baby arrives? The other guard stared into the distance. I think it multiplies. Inside the study, Vesper shifted slightly, one hand resting absent-mindedly on her belly. Evander's gaze caught the movement. And for just a moment, just one very small moment, his expression softened. Warm, quiet, dangerously fond. Vesper noticed. Of course she did. Her smile turned slow and knowing. Oh, she said softly. You're doing the soft face again. Evander immediately scowled. I do not have a soft face. You absolutely do. I absolutely do not. You look emotionally invested. I look tired. Vesper pushed herself carefully to her feet. Or walked over, stopped directly in front of him, close enough to be extremely inconvenient. Her smile curved, mischievous, familiar, dangerous. Well, Your Majesty, she said sweetly, resting one hand on her belly. Ready for the sequel? Evander looked at his chaotic, glowing, absolutely unstoppable wife, and understood with bone-deep certainty. Peace had never been an option. And now? It was about to start crying at 3 a.m. The royal palace had officially lost control of its own destiny. It happened at exactly 3 minutes past midnight, with one very offended newborn, and one very tired kingdom. Evander Whitlock, king, warrior, former peaceful man, stood beside the royal cradle looking like he had just survived a highly emotional natural disaster, which, to be fair, he had. In his arms was the smallest, but loudest human he had ever encountered. The baby scrunched her tiny face, inhaled, and released a cry so powerful it probably registered in neighboring territories. Evander blinked slowly. "She has your volume," he said hoarsely. From the bed, Vesper, glowing, exhausted, and already suspicious, pointed weakly at him. "Lies," she murmured. "That is clearly your dramatic bloodline." Across the room, the Queen dabbed her eyes with a handkerchief, while aggressively updating her now legendary notebook. "I told you," she sniffed proudly. "Perfect lungs, excellent projection, future Queen energy." Evander looked at the ceiling. "This family is very loud." The baby made a small, squeaky noise. Evander immediately froze, like a man who feared sudden movements might trigger another sonic event. Carefully, very carefully, he adjusted his hold, and the tiny fist in his hand tightened. And just like that, the great, terrifying Alpha King visibly melted. Vesper saw it. Of course she did. Her smile turned soft, warm, dangerously pleased. "Oh," she teased gently, voice still sleepy. "Look at you, Your Majesty." Evander cleared his throat. Attempted dignity. Failed immediately. "I am simply monitoring the air." Vesper hummed. "You're doing the soft face again." "I do not have a soft face." "You absolutely do." The baby yawned. Evander's entire expression went suspiciously tender. The Queen gasped quietly. "Write that down," she whispered to absolutely no one. "That's a memory." Evander shot her a look. "Mother." Ignored. Completely. Professionally. Vesper shifted slightly in the bed, watching her two favorite problems with quiet amusement. And then her smile slowly turned familiar, mischievous, dangerous. "Well," she said softly, eyes sparkling with promise. "Ready for the next adventure, Your Majesty?" Evander looked down at the tiny human gripping his finger, looked at his chaos-loving wife, and understood, with absolute certainty, peace had never been an option. And honestly, he wasn't even mad about it anymore. The end, for now,